Okay, everybody, I recently was invited to my old high school to inspire the youth, okay? I like to draw. I like to draw Spider-Man. I like to draw Superman. I like to draw Batman. I like to draw all kinds of things. My old teachers knew this. They said, come over here. So we want you to come and talk about comic books to our students, specifically graphic novels. That's what they were going over. So I came up with a presentation. I put it in Google Slides. I went all the way down back to the high school and I said, okay, kids, here it is. And every single one of those kids came out of that place reborn a comic book genius because of the information I distilled. Unfortunately, that was not recorded. It was a once-in-a-lifetime event and it cannot be reproduced. It's impossible. However, in the spirit of Tenacious D's tribute, I will be making a video about that experience to try to disseminate that information as best as I can. So what I have here, guys, is one question. What the heck is a comic book, and how do I make one? I have two. So who the heck am I and why should you listen to me? My name's Marshall. I'm an aspiring comic book artist and writer and colorist and all the different things. Here's some of the stuff that I've made. Here's a clip from the show that me and my buddy Michael do every single Wednesday.
Yeah, look at this with your 3D glasses, everybody.
Yeah, everybody put your 3D glasses on.
They're eating out Magneto. Wait.
Why did you say that?
That was hilarious, Michael. That's good. Great stuff. Thanks for sharing. Now that we got that out of the way, let's talk about comic books. Let's talk about graphic novels. So the first graphic novel, if we're talking about the term graphic novel, okay? The first one of those was A Contract with God by Will Eisner. Now, obviously, comics have existed long before 1978 when Eisner published A Contract with God, but it was kind of the first popularized use of the term a graphic novel. It was used just to kind of separate it out from the common swath of comic books, of superhero books, all kinds of different stuff, which were often seen as juvenile. And even if you read A Contract with God, you can even see it is formatted very differently. In a lot of ways, it is kind of more like a picture book with words on one page, and then over here is the art. It's gorgeous, it's fantastic, it dives into really interesting stories about what life was like growing up on a tenement in the Depression in New York. It's really well done, it's great. But, of course, comics history begins long before that, so let's go back. Let's go back. Let's go back. We're going back. This is me going back. Keep going. Now that we're at the beginning of time, it's important to note that some of the stuff at the beginning of this timeline have deeply outdated depictions of people of color and are generally what we would today consider in very poor taste and offensive. So, you've been warned. So if we're looking at the definition of comics as the Understanding Comics Scott McCloud thing of sequential art in deliberate sequence, then, by that definition, we can literally go all the way back to the beginning of time to the cave paintings, hieroglyphics, all kinds of different stuff like that. Great. Now we've defined it, we can move forward to what we would start to more closely recognize as a comic book today. So the earliest mass-produced comic was for the Glasgow Looking Glass. This was a newspaper in Glasgow. It was a publication that went out and had these cartoons in them. It's not a comic the way we would imagine it. It's several pictures, but they do tell a story. They are in deliberate sequence, so we would call that a comic. The next thing we go to 1843 with The Adventures of Obadiah Oldbuck. This is often seen as the first American comic book. Not that it originated in America, but it was the first one that we got. So then in 1897, you get the first actual use of the term comic book. And that, unfortunately, is in this guy. So that's the yellow kid. Probably talking about his hat, right? It's probably yellow, it means the hat. It's talking about the hat, right? Let's just say it was the hat. Let's just agree. So in 1933, you get the first modern American comic book, New Fun #1. What a title. Pretty good. I would read that. I'll take one home with me. Then in 1934, you get the creation of National Allied Publications. Remember them? They will become important later. In 1935, you get the first American comic with original material, which is Famous Funnies, a carnival of comics. We went from New Fun to Famous Funnies, and the Famous Funnies are a carnival of comics, all kinds of things. I went to the Carnival of Comics and nobody knew you. Okay, so in 1937, the same guy who created National Allied creates Detective Comics. Here's Detective Comics #1. He's also wearing yellow. Probably not related though. So then you get to 1938, you get the creation of Superman by Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster, the first ever superhero. It's a big deal. It totally creates a massive shift in comics and the direction of the medium as a whole. And then in 1939, you get the creation of Timely Comics. Remember them. They'll become important later. 1940, Detective Comics 27 comes out with the debut of Batman. 1941, Joe Simon and Jack Kirby co-created Captain America. You get that famous cover where Cap was just giving old Adolf a real wallop. In 1946, National Allied and DC turn into one company. 1951, Timely renames to Atlas Comics. So in 1954, Frederick Wertham publishes his book, The Seduction of the Innocent, which largely popularized this idea that comics were corrupting the youth, were again, seducing the innocent, that they were creating delinquency and all kinds of stuff like that, which is obviously a bunch of nonsense, but it got people really in an uproar. So before any kind of government censorship could come in, the Comics Code Authority was created to self-censor. And there was all kinds of rules in there. Crime couldn't be shown to be a profitable activity. Justice had to always defeat the crime at the end. You couldn't portray divorce, violence, all kinds of stuff like that. Werewolves and ghouls and vampires and all that kind of stuff, not allowed until 1971, when there was a slight revision because, give me my ghouls. Where are my ghouls? Give me my ghouls. You give me a comic book with ghouls, guys. Ghouls, please. Where's my ghouls? In the debut of the Joker originally, you get this guy who goes on TV, says, I'm gonna murder this man at midnight, and then he does it. He's a heartless gangster. In the age of the Comics Code Authority, the Joker becomes a harmless prankster. He gets his joy buzzer, he gets his silly Joker car, all this different kind of stuff. When you look at the 1960s TV show for Batman, that's the kind of comics that were created in a world that was governed by the Comics Code Authority. It made a huge change, a huge shift. In 1961, Atlas renames to Marvel Comics. Whoa! And this was the beginning of the Marvel age. It was a very different thing. Post-World War II, comics were kind of going into a slump. Superheroes were not as popular as they used to be, and Marvel kind of brought that back. Marvel went from this place of science. Everybody in the Marvel universe is a scientist or a science experiment or an astronaut or something like that. Captain America, science experiment. Spider-Man, science experiment and scientist. Tony Stark, scientist. Bruce Banner, science experiment and scientist. Reed Richards, science experiment and scientist. All these different people come from this same kind of space age, futuristic kind of feeling world where all the DC characters came out of this pre-World War II and during World War II propagandist kind of feeling godlike world. When Marvel came in and started creating their characters like Iron Man, Spider-Man, all these, the Fantastic Four, you get a really new take on a genre that even in that time was starting to get stale. And it revitalized the entire industry. Sales go up. Everybody's super excited about it. We love it. We love comic books. All my ghouls are here. My guys and ghouls, we're all back. So skip ahead a little bit. 1977, National Allied renames itself to DC Comics. They had been called DC for a long time, named after their imprint Detective Comics. Everyone called them DC Comics. They made it official. Then you get to 1978 with the publishing of a contract with God. And that's the end of comics books history. Nothing has happened after that. Everything that I said before that is the only things that happened before that. I didn't miss anything. And if you think I missed anything, you're wrong. And I'm right. I'm wearing a suit. You have to listen to me. Okay, so now we understand comic books. We understand the history of comic books. Where did they come from? Where are they going? All this different stuff. But I want to understand why comic books. Why should I make a comic book? Who cares about comic books? Why don't I write a novel? Why don't I make a movie? Why don't I go on a walk in the park? But really, there's a lot of reasons that comics are unique. There's a lot of reasons that one would want to make a comic rather than a movie or a book or whatever. The thing that I've really closed in on is closure. And this again is, a lot of this comes from Understanding Comics by Scott McCloud. Plug, go check it out, it's really good. The idea of closure is that in comics you've got this white space between panels, okay? That's called the gutters. In between these two panels, something is happening, and that's you. Your brain is deciding what happens in between those two places. You are actively participating in the reading of this comic, in the creation of this comic in a way. It's a weird thing that no other medium has. You read a book and you have to imagine the scene in your head, but you're still imagining what the writer is telling you is happening. In a movie, they're showing you exactly what's happening. You get a choice. You don't choose the pacing, you don't choose anything like that. In comics, you get a say in the pacing and you get a say in what is happening in that closure space, whether you're conscious of it or not. There are some comics that just, you can feel the motion, you can feel the movement, you can feel what's happening between the panels in a major way. One of the things I really narrowed in on was the Builder War in Jonathan Hickman's Avengers. To make a long story short, the Avengers are fighting a big threat and it's a big bad problem. They're gonna pretend to surrender. So Thor goes down to pretend to surrender to these guys. He throws his hammer and you just get the idea of the motion. You can just feel it, but it doesn't happen. None of it is happening. It's not real. None of it is actually moving. But when you see Thor throw the hammer, you can feel it. And that's down to Jerome Pena, that's down to Jonathan Hickman, and the way that the two of them work together to plot out those pages. The moment when Mjolnir is going past the spaceship, around the sun, back the other direction, into the atmosphere, and crack-a-thoom, breaks the sound barrier and then goes straight through this guy. That final panel, there's so much implied motion throughout this entire thing, but the last moment of Thor catching Mjolnir, you can feel it. You can see it, the way that the cape is billowing, the way that his hair is moving, the motion, and just the grip. There's something about it that's really impressive, and only comics can do that. You create the story with the writer, with the artist, in a way that you don't in anything else that exists. Okay, that's why comics, but how do I write a comic book? What if I want to write a comic book? What do I do, Marshall? Hey, I'm just a guy. I'm just a regular guy. I want to write a comic book. What do I do? How do I do that? I don't know. Okay, but actually, there's a few ways. I mean, I say I don't know because there is no right way to do it. It's not like making a movie or making a novel, where if you're writing a novel, you just start writing it. You make a draft, you make an outline maybe, but you just start making it. A screenplay, there's an exact right way that you're supposed to write a screenplay. Comics, it's like, I don't know, you can do whatever you want. Jeff Loeb came out of screenwriting, so if you look at his stuff, it usually looks somewhat like a screenplay. If you look at Alan Moore's work, man, it looks like a novel. It's crazy. The level of description of each panel and everything is intense, but at the same time, he's telling an artist, hey, if you have a better idea than me, go ahead and do that instead. The Marvel method is another way, famously where the writer just makes an outline for the story, the artist goes and draws the whole thing, and then the writer comes back and plots in the story after the fact. Sounds crazy, doesn't make a lot of sense, but it does allow the artist a lot of room to make really dynamic stuff, a lot of dynamic work, and in a way it forces them to do that because there aren't words yet. You're forced to make really crazy, intense, dynamic work, and that's why Marvel looked the way it did and looked so dynamic and so interesting and so fascinating in the 60s in a way that DC didn't. So we talk about who I am, we talk about why a comic book, we talk about how do you write a comic book, how do you draw a comic book? There's all kinds of ways to draw a comic book. You take a pencil, the head and the body. Spider-Man, the Captain America has a shield, you draw all of it, you throw it out there. I don't know, man, it's hard to do a lecture about how to draw. How do you draw a comic book? Well, a lot of people draw a comic book. And by a lot of people draw a comic book, I don't mean there's a lot of artists out there. I mean a lot of different people draw one comic book. okay? You've got a penciler, you've got an inker, you've got a colorist, you've got a letterer. Sometimes a lot of those visual sides of things are one person. There's some people who work that way. Other people, you get a really solid team who work together for their entire life, like Jim Lee and Scott Williams. These guys have always been working together. Cliff Rathburn and Ryan Ottley. Usually if you're drawing a comic traditionally, you're drawing it on 11 by 17 sized paper. If you ever read a comic and say, wow, how'd they draw so small? They didn't. It was big and they made it smaller later. If you're drawing digitally, then you got every tool available to you that you could possibly want because it's a computer. And on the computer, you can do anything. Computer changes everything. Everything is computer. It's kind of remarkable the difference in the ways that different artists work. If you look at some artist lines, pencils that is, they're really, really loose, and then they do a lot of the final work in the inks. David Mazzucchelli worked a lot like that, especially if you look at his Batman Year One Artist Edition book, you can see his layouts and his pencils compared to the final inks. The pencils almost look like basic thumbnails compared to the final inks. It's terrifying to me to possibly work like that. But you get other people who then make extremely tight pencils that you could almost just scan and turn it black and white, and there's your inks. But again, the thing in all of this is that everybody works differently. I mentioned Mazzucchelli. You look at Mazzucchelli's work, you compare that to Tim Sale. These guys are both a bit more cartoon, but man, they're different. You compare Jim Lee to Tim Sale, even more different. It is all across the board, and these things are all great, but they're all different. Oh man, I could go on forever about colors. I think of colors as like the music in a movie. If you've got okay music and gorgeous pictures, you've got an okay movie. But if you've got okay pictures and a gorgeous score, you got a winner. You have to understand the piece of art that you're making. And that's what a really good music score does. You have to understand the scene, you have to understand the intent of the scene, the feel of the scene, what you're trying to get across. And it's the same thing with colors. You can have an okay colorist color your book and it'll be fine. It'll be a just fine comic book. You can even have a black and white comic book and it'll be just fine. Ninja Turtles is out there and it's hugely popular. The Walking Dead, hugely popular. Sin City, all these different things. But when you have a really good colorist who really understands your lines, your book, your writing, it completely changes the game. I look at FCO and Greg Capullo, generational team. Mike Spicer and Daniel Warren Johnson, incredible, incredible stuff. You can't overstate the power of really good colors in a comic. It's ultimately, I think, even more powerful and important than the lines a lot of the time. Somebody else in the comic book process that doesn't get enough credit is the letterer. There's a whole other person who just puts the words on the page. And it's not just putting the words on the page. Anybody can put words on the page, but these people are expressive. Whatever your character is feeling, there's a way to visually portray that through the lettering. It's not something people think about. It's really an unconscious thing. Most of the time, you just read the book and in your head, you feel what they're feeling. You imagine what they're saying and you can hear how they're saying it. Why? Well, because the pencils and the inks are really good, hopefully, because the acting is really good on the characters, but in a large part, a lot of times it's because of the lettering. If you look at Daniel Warren Johnson's Transformers, you can see that all the robots have different robots. You can see that all the Transformers have different word bubbles than the humans do. And then you look at Soundwave, and just Soundwave has a different bubble than all the other Transformers. Now, I grew up watching Transformers. Did I remember that Soundwave has a robotic voice in the way the other Transformers don't? No, I did not remember that. When I read the book, did I understand that based solely on the lettering? Absolutely I did. Which is why when we talk on our show about comics, we call out the letterer as well. It's a big job and it makes a big difference and they need to be more appreciated. There's a lot of really, really good comics in the industry today, but I want more. So if you have an idea, make your idea. There's not a right way to write your book. There's not a right way to draw your book. Just do it. Just come up with an idea, put it out there, even if you think it sucks. Put it out there, see what happens. Maybe it doesn't suck. Maybe it does suck, and you need to do another idea, and another idea, and another idea until you hit on gold. I don't know, but we will never know if you don't do it. For now, that's all I have to say about that. So I just want to thank you for coming and stopping by and watching this video. You didn't have to be here, so I appreciate the time that you choose to spend with us. If you like this, you can check out other stuff on this channel, namely the Tales from the Long Box show, where we talk about comics every single Wednesday. I also do some art streams on Friday nights sometimes, and I try to put out a process video of my own work every Monday. But really, from the bottom of my heart, it means a lot that you guys are here. It means a lot that more and more of you guys show up every single time we post a video. It's huge, and it seriously means the world. So thanks for being here. If you have something you would like to hear me talk about, put it in the comments, let me know. If you have thoughts about what I've said, put it in the comments, let me know. If you disagree with me, put it in the comments, let me know. All you ghouls, put it in the comments, let me know. Follow us on all these different places, check it out, that's good, and good luck.